Let's explore more, even more, autistic history and the Autism Wars. This is part 104 of a series. So I left off in the last video sharing a form letter that Bernard Rimland had written in support of early intensive behavioral intervention, or EIBI, or the Lovaas method. In this letter he wrote back in 1994. And you can hear, as I read this letter, the power of Rimland harnessing parents as advocates and empowering his agenda and pushing it forward, using them to help create the noise and the pressure on the people in the powers that be. So here is the next part. It is titled Misconceptions. And Rimland states here, when I first began writing and lecturing about behavior modification in 1965, two misconceptions were prevalent. Unfortunately, the same two misconceptions are prevalent today. And today, of course, in his era, we are talking about 1994. So we went way, way back in the archives and pulled this one out. He states here, some critics of behavioral intervention claim that intervention produces children with rigid, robot-like behaviors, like trained seals. That is absolute nonsense, he states. In her excellent book, Let Me Hear Your Voice, author Catherine Morris, familiar name, remember, tells how her two severely, again his words, autistic children, both of whom were diagnosed as autistic by several outstanding neurologists and psychiatrists in New York City, have recovered to the point that there is no reason to consider them as other than normal, largely as a result of intensive home-based early intervention behavioral program. I have recently spoken to Ira Cohen, PhD, and Richard Perry, MD, who are familiar with the two children described in Catherine Morris's book. They report that they have seen no signs of autism in these children, and in fact have written an article to that effect, which is scheduled for publication in the near future in the Journal of American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. The second misconception is that behavioral intervention commonly entails the use of aversive stimuli. Not true. Behavioral intervention uses a great deal of positive reinforcement, and even mildly aversive stimuli such as a loud no are rarely, if ever, required. It states here in parentheses, aversives were used more often in the early days. This is 1994. What are the early days? All right. Next part is titled Recovery from Autism. Why is there such skepticism about the effects of early behavioral intervention? No doubt some are skeptical, understandably, because autism is known to be a biological disorder, and it may seem improbable that a behavioral treatment could be so effective. Do not underestimate the body's ability to accomplish nearly incredible feats, given highly focused, intensive, long-term training. Consider the remarkable skills of an Olympic gymnast and the intensity of the training required. The amazing feats of the gymnast become possible only through intensive training. The evidence shows that it is possible for at least some autistic children to learn how to overcome their disability if they start young and their practice is really intensive and one-on-one, 30 plus hours a week. It's like a job for a baby. All right, so he states here, but just what is it that they must practice to overcome autism? I addressed this question in my 1965 paper, Operant Conditioning, Breakthrough in the Treatment of Mentally Ill Children. All right, let's note 1, autism is not a disease, and 2, autism is not mental illness. It's developmental difference. Oh my goodness. All right, he quotes himself here. No one knows why operant conditioning, now called behavior modification, works, nor why the changes in behavior generalize and apply to so many new behaviors. My own theory is that the operant training, in addition to teaching the specific behaviors, also teaches the child how to direct and focus his attention. Tuning in, learning how to focus our attention and deciding what to pay attention to comes so naturally to us that we take it for granted, but you can't learn unless you can pay attention. Autistic children, I suggest, need to learn how to concentrate, focus, and direct their attention. Without specific immediate motivation, not long-range motivation such as a college degree, without a specifically designed program which allows them to proceed in small steps, many will never learn. With operant training, the autistic child not only learns, he learns how to learn. All right, Rimland writes, when I wrote those words 30 years ago, I did not realize how well even severely impaired autistic children could learn to deploy their attention effectively if the circumstances, intensive behavior modification, required that they learn to attend. In that same paper, which was based on the talk I gave in founding the Autism Society of America in 1965, I also said, the value of placing children in such a firm, structured classroom situation with other children similar to themselves, retarded or normal, again, old language from 1990s, right? Cannot be overstated. Once a child's behavior and attention is under control, the family and teachers can take over his further training and socialization. If the child's teachers and his family are insistent that the child conform and improve, and they employ the principles described above, his improvement will often be remarkable. Well, they got compliance or silence built right into their therapies for us, don't they? All right, so that's a bit about that, but I'm going to jump in about the same era, 93, 94. Rimland was very active in writing and showing his viewpoints and opinions. And he does so in this article that he wrote, I believe, in 93, talking plain talk about PDD and the diagnosis of autism. And I'm sharing this because you can hear some of that push back and forth about autism and the belief system around it. So in this letter, Bernard Rimland is arguing against the term PDD, a pervasive developmental disorder. Anyhow, I'm just going to share it. You can kind of get a feel that even back in the 90s, this was already, Autism Wars were full in effect already, and we haven't even gotten anywhere near the autism speak era. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to wrap this one up here and start this letter on the next video. So thank you for hanging out with me and learning a bit more autistic history and the Autism Wars. And when we know better, we can hopefully make a better way, right, for autistics in the future.